If you only skim the headlines, you might think India has already picked its side in the great power struggle. It's in the Quad, alongside the United States, Japan, and Australia. That sounds like a straightforward bet on the West. But look closer. India is also in BRICS, sitting at the same table as China and Russia. It buys most of its weapons and oil from Moscow, partners with Israel for drones and missile defense, leans on Iran for energy access, and trades in huge volumes with Beijing despite a bitter border rivalry. How does India manage to keep juggling these alliances, and can it keep it up? Welcome to Global Risk Profile, where we break down the headlines that matter and the ones that should. Since the start of 2025, the balancing act has only gotten trickier. Washington has raised tariffs on Indian exports and threatened sanctions over Russian oil. Beijing has pushed forward with a giant dam project on the Brahmaputra River. Modi has sat down with both Xi and Putin at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. And in May, India and Pakistan fought a short, sharp conflict that ended only after US President Trump publicly claimed to have brokered a ceasefire, claims that were not well received in Delhi. So the question stands more sharply than ever. Can India keep walking the middle road? Or, as Mr. Miyagi warned the Karate Kid, walk in the middle too long and sooner or later you get squished like grape. To understand why India plays this game, you need the backstory. When India won independence in 1947, Prime Minister Nehru launched a foreign policy doctrine known as non-alignment. The Cold War was taking shape, but India refused to join either bloc. It wasn't about neutrality, it was about freedom. India wanted to make its own choices. In practice, things tilted. After 1971, India leaned toward the Soviet Union, signing a treaty of peace and friendship. The US, meanwhile, had backed Pakistan and began courting China under Nixon. The tilt toward Moscow wasn't just strategic, it fit India's own socialist, centralized economic model. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, India had to adjust. In the 1990s, New Delhi liberalized its economy, opening the door to globalization and Western capital. Strategic autonomy remained the mantra, but the playing field shifted. That doctrine, neither locked in nor fully free, is still the thread that runs through India's choices today. Let's start with Washington. The US is India's largest trading partner. In 2024, bilateral trade hit more than $212 billion, with India running a surplus of over $26 billion. That's a major economic lifeline. Defense and technology cooperation has deepened too. Agreements like COMCASA and BECA allowed intelligence and equipment sharing. The ISET framework, initial on critical and emerging technologies, is designed to fast-track joint research in AI, semiconductors, and defense tech. The GE-HAL deal to co-produce jet engines in India is one of the most ambitious US-India defense projects ever. But 2025 has added turbulence. In April, President Trump imposed a 10% baseline tariff on nearly all imports, then added a 25% tariff rate on India specifically. That hits everything from textiles to IT services. And Trump's administration has gone further, warning that countries buying Russian oil, India most of all, could face secondary sanctions. This puts New Delhi in a bind. Russia supplies over a third of India's arms and since 2022 has become its largest oil source. Walking away would mean upending both energy security and defense planning. So what you see is India trying to compartmentalize, keep the defense tech projects alive with the US, even while resisting American pressure on Russia. That is strategic autonomy at work. Trading friction on one side for continued cooperation on another. For India, Russia isn't just a partner of convenience, it's a legacy. From tanks to fighter jets to nuclear submarines, Moscow has armed India for decades. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute estimates that from 2020 to 2024, 36% of India's arms imports came from Russia. France now accounts for about a third and Israel for around 13%, but Russia is still number one. Then there is energy. In December 2024, Rosneft signed a 10-year deal with Reliance Industries to ship 500,000 barrels of oil every day. That is about $13 billion a year. For an energy-hungry economy, it's a bargain, especially under Western sanctions that keep Russian oil discounted. And yet, that's exactly where US pressure bites. Washington has started linking tariffs on Indian exports to those oil purchases. Some Indian refiners briefly pause spot buys to test the waters, but overall, the oil keeps flowing. Because in Delhi's calculation, stability at home trumps pressure abroad. Iran is a smaller piece of the puzzle, but an instructive one. For years, India counted on Iran for oil, but after 2019, under US sanctions, those imports dried up. Today, Iranian crude is a drop in the bucket compared to Russia's shipments. Still, Iran matters for geography. The Chabahar port project, a long-standing Indian investment, offers a route to Afghanistan and Central Asia that bypasses Pakistan. In 2024, India signed a 10-year operating deal for Chabahar. But in February 2025, Washington ordered a review of the sanctions waiver that allowed it. That means even this carefully managed project could come under threat. Here again, we see the limits of autonomy. India wants options, but Washington's sanctions architecture narrows the field. Let's now look at three very different relationships. First, Israel. Over the past decade, India has bought billions in Israeli drones, radar systems, and missile defense. In 2024, Israel recorded about $15 billion in defense exports, and India was among the biggest customers. This is a fast-growing partnership rooted in shared security concerns and technology. Second, BRICS. What used to be 5 countries is now 9. Since 2024, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Iran and the UAE have joined. That expands the club, but also makes it more China-centric. India gets a bigger stage, but it also faces a bigger shadow. And China. Trade between the two has grown to over $113 billion in imports versus $14 billion in exports, a $99 billion deficit for India. At the same time, troops face off along the Ladakh border, and in July 2025, Beijing began construction on a mega dam on the Brahmaputra River. For India, that's not just about water, it's about vulnerability. Geopolitical analysts have long warned that China's river projects could one day be used as geopolitical leverage. That day is inching closer. Then there is Pakistan, the neighbor that defines so much of India's security posture. In May 2025, tragedy struck in Kashmir. A terrorist attack in Pahalgam killed 26 civilians. India's response was Operation Sindoor, a missile struck followed by 4 days of cross-border clashes involving drones, mortars, and artillery. Both sides suffered casualties and both claimed victory. Enter Washington. President Trump went on television calling the escalation a shame and claimed the US has brokered a ceasefire. Modi publicly pushed back, insisting the talks were strictly bilateral. For Indians, this was familiar ground. Ever since the Simla Agreement of 1972, Delhi has rejected outside mediation on Kashmir. Many saw Trump's intervention as undermining that stance. Autonomy again became the rallying cry. Just months later, Modi sat down with Xi and Putin at the SCO summit in Tianjin. Those meetings weren't just protocol, they were messaging. India was saying to Washington, "We'll keep our options open." To Moscow, "We're still here despite sanctions pressure." To Beijing, "We'll talk even if we don't trust you." That's the essence of the doctrine. Autonomy doesn't mean isolation, it means hedging, engaging, and never locking yourself in. On the surface, India's strategy of autonomy still works. It has managed to draw technology and capital from the United States, energy and arms from Russia, defense partnerships with Israel, trade with China, and access through Iran, all without fully committing to anyone's camp. But the strain is visible. Washington is tightening the screws with tariffs and the threat of secondary sanctions, Beijing is pressing its advantage on the Brahmaputra and the Himalayan frontier. Pakistan remains a live wire, as the short conflict earlier this year showed. The risk isn't only that India may one day be forced to choose. It's that by refusing to choose, it may be seen as unreliable by all sides. And as history shows, tactical hedges can harden into strategic directions. The decisions taken now may define India's posture for a generation. As Mr. Miyagi put it, walk left side safe, walk right side safe, walk middle squished like grape. The middle road cannot last forever. But here is the deeper layer. The world today is not simply a contest between Washington and Beijing. It's not just Team America versus Team China. Countries have a right and a responsibility to chart their own path. Autonomy in that sense is real and worth defending. The real fault line is different. It is between nations with all their imperfections that still recognize human dignity, liberty, and pluralism, and those regimes that seek to reduce people to tools, to erase freedom, to weaponize dependence. This specter finds its clearest expression in the Chinese Communist Party, but is not limited to China. It's a pattern of surveillance without accountability, of power without limits, of wealth without humanity. In that sense, the choice really is black and white. India, like every other country, will have to decide whether its autonomy is used to strengthen the human spirit or buy short-term advantage from systems that could extinguish it. Strategic autonomy can be noble when it guards sovereignty, when it resists being drawn into someone else's war. But autonomy without discernment can slide into complicity, and that is the true danger. The real question is whether India will use its hard-earned autonomy to walk towards a future that preserves humanity, or toward an order where human beings are no longer treated as ends, but as means. That's it for this episode of Global Risk Profile. If you found this useful, thoughtful, or just different, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. Remember, the headlines may change, but the deeper patterns rarely do. Thanks for listening, and stay sharp.